This is the Registered Behavior Technician course presented by Shaza Attar. The course content was created by Shaza Attar and is the property of Autism Therapy and Training, Inc. All rights are reserved. This training program is based on the Behavior Analyst Certification Board 2018 RBT Task List 2nd edition and is designed to meet the 40-hour training requirement for the RBT credential. The program is offered independent of the BACB. Remember, in each class, we will have our active listening, a quiz, and a competency assessment. Welcome to our topic on professional boundaries. This, in my opinion, is one of the very important topics. This is an extension of our 3 ethic courses, which we do later, and we'll go through each ethical code. But we're going to really narrow down into this topic because it has some very important value. Most professional fields have this as a major topic of discussion. You'll find that nurses, doctors, dentists, and others will express the importance of it. Why? Well, when we as healthcare professionals or educators, we can easily cross those boundaries without really realizing. Because we care for others, sometimes we can get too involved, and that can become an issue. So I want to talk about maintaining professional boundaries. We will talk about with who and how, and I want us to work through recognizing when you think you may have crossed that boundary. So who should you create professional boundaries with? Well, 100% your clients and client family members. This could be the child you work with or the adult that you work with. This can also be the parent or guardian that is responsible for the person you work with. Another is your supervisor, coworkers, and finally, other professionals that you come into contact with. So you might be wondering, why? And what is a professional boundary? How do you know if a cup of coffee with your boss is okay and when it may not be? What about giving your client a hug? Is that okay? And when is it okay? Is there a boundary to that? Where do we draw the line? Boundaries create a clear relationship between you and the person. When you don't have a clear boundary, you could lead into an unprofessional relationship, dual relationship, and that can impact the quality of treatment or even how others perceive your value of work. Let me give you an example. You and your client have a working relationship based on trust. As a paraprofessional, you have information about the client's family, health, history, and other personal information. As a practitioner, we have some power associated with us since we provide access to services. If a practitioner misuses their power and takes advantage of the client, this would be considered abusing that power and a violation. Whether you're aware of it or not, you need to use your professional judgment to prevent violations of these boundaries and protect these boundaries as soon as you can. You will need to self-monitor and reflect to ensure that you're behaving appropriately. You need to learn to identify boundary issues and ensure you set clear boundaries with your clients or supervisor or coworkers. It's very important to manage boundaries based on your client's dignity, privacy, and to control professional detachment so that you don't get too involved or attached to that one client. This happens with therapists and patients quite a bit. If you work with children, you may get really attached to that one client. I've heard therapists say things like, "They're like a son to me." You often see therapists lose their skill as a therapist and begin mothering that child. I've also seen therapists that quit have a hard time detaching from their primary learner. So it's important to remind yourself that you're a paraprofessional helping this client and to remind yourself that they're your client. Not your child, not your friend, or anything like that. Violating boundaries doesn't happen overnight. It's usually an accumulation of events that results in that crossing those boundaries. It often starts off very subtle and develops into something you weren't even expecting. We caution future RBTs and professionals about these boundaries because it could be harmful to the client. Our number one priority is ensuring the safety, privacy, and protection of our clients. We have to step out of that selfish world we live in and put our emotions aside. For example, you may be working with a family and your main point of contact is the father who is divorced. As you slowly slip into having feelings for that father, your client, the learner, may suffer. Your focus and attention is no longer on the learner, but rather the father. This could cause harm to the client and would be a selfish act on your part. So these are things we want to avoid and refrain from at all costs. Boundary issues can be a wide variety of situations. It could be sexual relations with your supervisor or client, to financial dealings, to social interactions. Putting your arm around a client or supervisor because they're grieving, or giving a child a hug. So it's important to view the situation and watch to see if it's a recurring behavior. A client that you hug because they're grieving suddenly starts hugging you every day may cause you to think about how you can handle this situation better. I'll give you an example. When I first opened the center's phone line was my cell phone number. I ended up getting a private cell phone for myself and used my old number as the center's line. Clients would text to cancel a session or text if they were running late. One day, one of the fathers texted to let me know his wife was going to be late. No problem, I thought, and my day went on. A few days later, I got another text from him letting me know that his wife would be late, and the conversation changed. It became a little too friendly, and on top of it, he started insulting his wife. That quickly started warning bells in my head. I didn't want to be that person on the other end of that text. I felt it was completely inappropriate. A few days later, I got another text, and now it was just, hey, and him wanting to chit-chat. Well, I stopped answering texts and got the center a phone line, notified all clients to cancel or notify us of any late pickups, and to please call the center's line. The other line would no longer be in service. I had to act quick. And when I talk about communicating with clients, I usually don't prefer texting. I feel texting is a very informal way of communicating. Phone or email seems a little bit better, seems a little bit more formal. And you can be more formal with those communications. So again, be aware of your behavior and take action immediately to correct the situation. Remember, the onus is on you, not the client. Jenny is an RBT. She's been working with Mr. Mann's son, Johnny, for 5 years. Jenny does home-based therapy. She arrives every day at 9 a.m. when both Mr. Mann and Johnny are having breakfast. Mr. Mann is so generous. He'll prepare Jenny's breakfast and coffee before she gets there. She spends the first 30 minutes of her session eating breakfast with the two of them. Now I want you to keep the story in mind as it unfolds. Our ethical code of conduct makes us aware and cautions us against dual relationships. We know that a dual relationship is having more than one relationship with a person. We talk about this in our ethic classes. So if you work with a family, the relationship you have is client-therapist relationship. Dual relationships can begin when we start mixing in non-professional situations, such as going to a client-family gathering, when we share personal stories, and talk about very personal things. When we do favors for our clients, again, as professionals, we are not involved in our clients' lives. But how involved should we get? Do favors? Would that be crossing the line? To avoid such dual relationships, we want to avoid giving out our personal contact information, such as phone numbers, home addresses, and so on. It's best to use your work email and number, or get those if you don't. Now, you might be a home-based therapist like Jenny, and all you have is a personal phone as your work line, and you work out of your home, and that's the address that you have. The question is whether or not you need to give out that information. Your number, well, maybe. But then you need to create a time boundary. Calls are only answered between 9 and 5. After 5 p.m., the phone is not answered. But even this can get tricky. I had a client that was very sweet and friendly. I was a home-based therapist and worked independently. My cell phone number was my only phone line, so clients got that number. Initially, things were fine. But then this one client was calling me all the time at all times of the day. I remember one time I got a call at 11 p.m. I see her number and I was shocked, then a bit worried. I answered the call. Again, you have to think. I was a new therapist, very involved, and wanted to save the world kind of person. And so in my mind, I thought it was urgent and wanted to support my client. I answer the phone and she starts talking about things and wants to share some great news. We had been working on toilet training with her son, who had a horrible experience when he first started therapy with another therapist long ago. We had been working on this goal for him and it was a struggle, but we started to get some success. Well, he had a bowel movement at 11 p.m. for the first time in 4 years. Mom was very excited and happy and wanted to share the news. So I thought, okay, it was a big deal for Mom, that's fine. This started happening each week, then every other day. And it turned into just conversations where Mom just wanted someone to talk to. After a couple of weeks of this, I realized I was now in trouble. I had reinforced this behavior. How do I get out of it? Well, I started ignoring the calls, even put a message on my voicemail that calls would only be answered between 9 and 4 p.m. Then one day I get a call from a number. I'm thinking it's a personal call, so I answered it. And there she was on the line, calling from her husband's work number. As you can see, giving out your number can become a problem. You don't want your client to feel like you're their friend and that they can call you at any time. I never in a million years thought this would happen, but it did. So I caution you to be careful so that you don't fall into these mistakes. But if you do, learn to recognize it and get yourself out of it as soon as possible. Remember Jenny and Mr. Man? Having breakfast with him each morning? What do you think about that? Would that possibly evolve into a dual relationship? Seems innocent, and Jenny knows that Mr. Man is married. But is it possible that something could evolve accidentally? The answer is yes. And so Jenny should find a way to refuse the breakfast and let Mr. Man know that she has already eaten breakfast and get to work right away, or maybe delay her session so that Johnny can finish his breakfast before she comes. Let's continue. Another major area where the client-therapist relationship can begin to change is social media. So many people use social media, Facebook, Instagram, and other avenues where people post pictures or personal things about themselves. And sometimes clients can get curious to learn more about you. It's best to keep your profile private on these accounts and avoid friending your clients, and never ever post things about your clients on social media. But another thing to keep in mind is watch out what you post. Again, it is a personal place and you may post inappropriate pictures or make inappropriate comments, but these things can negatively impact your professional life. For example, when we call new therapists for an interview, we go through their profiles and go and do Google searches. This is important because they'll be a part of our organization and representing our center. We value our clients and want to ensure we give them the best quality of service. We don't want to be associated with anyone who is inappropriate. So watch out for those things and delete inappropriate things or lock your profile to avoid these kinds of things on social media. Let's go back for a moment to Jenny and Mr. Man. After 5 years of providing service, Jenny is moving on since Johnny has now been discharged from IBI services and being fully integrated into his school. On the last day, Mr. Man gives her a hug farewell and wishes her luck. Is that okay, or does that cross the professional boundary? Well, during our time providing services, we want to be careful not to touch or hug inappropriately with any of our clients. There really is no need for it. However, on that final day when you're saying goodbye, that may be acceptable. This might be something you do or you don't. I think if you're very professional with clients and they request a farewell hug, that could be fine. Again, you may need to learn about the policies within your organization. You may need to know their rules and ensure you don't violate them. Another important area when it comes to professionalism and professional boundaries is the way that you dress. Again, if you work in a school or an autism center or hospital, they may have a specific dress code. So find out what that is. But a general rule is to dress professionally. What does that mean? Well, a tank top and shorts may not be the look you want, but a collared shirt and black pants may be more appropriate. If you work with young children where a dress shirt or suit won't make a lot of sense, something proper, clean, and suitable, wearing flat shoes, may be more appropriate than high heels for safety reasons. You want to look neat and presentable. Proper hygiene would also fall into this category. Again, if you work in a center or an organization, they have the right to talk to you about your hygiene if they feel it's inappropriate. A very hard topic to have with staff members. Someone who doesn't shower regularly or doesn't wash their clothes may need to be spoken to and be made aware of. Sometimes we have girls wear a very messy bun or ponytail, so I think there should be a difference between a messy, neat bun and a hairdo of I just woke up and tied my hair up. So pay attention to those. I also give my staff the example of a doctor you are going to see who walks in looking like this. How comfortable do you feel with them treating you? The truth is, we may make judgments about people within the first few seconds of seeing them, and we need to be aware of that. We often will make a judgment and question their credibility by how they talk, walk, dress, and mistakes they may make. I'll tell you a funny story. I had to go in for surgery, but before I could, I had to meet with the doctor so he could explain to me the procedure and what was going to be happening. So I walk into the doctor's office in the hospital after 4 hours of waiting that I had spent, and I had given them my MRI CD. So he puts in the CD into the computer, and I look at it and I see a man's MRI. It was clearly a man. Plus, his name was on the CD. Oops, there goes his confidentiality. So I look at the doctor and he looks at the CD, and now I'm shocked, wondering, does he not see that this is a man? Finally, he looks at me and says, I don't think this is you, right? And I chuckled and said, no, it's not me. Then he explains how it's going to be a 4-hour procedure of me under as he operates. I said, thank you very much. And I left looking for another doctor and a second opinion. I wasn't comfortable being under the knife for 4 hours with a doctor that couldn't see that that was not me, and it was clear that it was somebody else. I'm sure he's a very competent doctor, very good at what he does, but for me, I didn't want to be treated by him. So keep these in mind as you build relationships with your clients and even within your organization. Another thing to think about when thinking of professional boundaries is money. Our clients may pay us directly, especially when you do home-based therapies. If not, usually it's your company that pays you. But regardless, taking money as a gift is inappropriate. Giving your clients money is also not appropriate. We shouldn't lend them money or even borrow. You bill for your hours and that's it. If you work for an organization and a client gives you a tip or a gift, you need to find out quickly how to address that. Our ethical code of conduct discusses gifts. As we know, that would be a violation. So learn to refuse those gifts nicely. All right, let's do a Scrabble word. The word is gone, G-A-N, and this is a trap for a game. Again, the word is gone, G-A-N. All right, let's move on. We talked about having a professional boundary with your client and their family members. We also want to have a professional relationship with our supervisors. You want to have a clear relationship with your supervisor. Mutual respect, respecting each other's time. You want to avoid being too friendly, going out for coffee, eating lunch together, driving each other into work, or driving each other home. These can quickly start violating that professional boundary. You want to avoid dating your supervisor, friending them on social media. Always keep in mind, if I do this, could it cross that boundary? Before you do it, think about it, think long term. If you feel there is a chance, then just avoid it. What about your coworkers? Same thing applies. You can get very close with your coworkers, sometimes too close that it can actually cause issues for you and your job. Some can get so involved in negative talk or chit-chatting on the job that it resulted in, people losing their job. Coworkers are great. They're a great support system at work, but you want to be careful what you share or how much you share with them. Same thing goes for social media. And if you do friend them, what you post, they could use that against you. Another problem that I've seen with coworkers being so close is when one of them gets promoted to another position. Suppose you're an RBT and your goal is to become a BCBA. You start your coursework and the company decides to give you a higher level of work and giving you different tasks as part of your training. Well, guess what happens? Your coworker friends may start to feel a little jealous. They may feel like you've changed, and you may have to change how you are with them because of that new role that you're in and creating that professional boundary. So keep those in mind. You can definitely be friendly with your coworkers. You can spend a lot of time together, but there is friendly and there is being friends. So recognize the difference and be aware of it. Many times companies will do holiday events or get-togethers. You want to be professional during those times. Watch your behavior, watch what you say, and if you're consuming alcohol, watch that you don't overdo it and end up doing something you will regret later. I've addressed the professional boundary, ways to avoid it, but let's talk about the violations and recognizing them. A boundary violation is when your relationship moves from professional to personal. For example, you start dating your supervisor. You borrow money from a client. You become best friends with your supervisor. These are all violations. So what's your responsibility? You need to recognize your power over the client and understand that it does exist, period. You need to respect that each client is diverse and unique, and each person has their own set of values and beliefs. You can't allow your own beliefs to affect your relationship with the client. For example, if you believe that divorce is wrong and your client is getting divorced, you can't instill your beliefs of divorce on your client. You need to be able to identify the professional boundary. You cannot exploit the relationship for personal gain. You need to understand your code of ethics. Understand the prevention of sexual abuse and conflicts of interest. You need to be proactive and determine if there is a possible risk of violating these boundaries. I'll give you an example. In 2017, a new client started with us. His father was so involved in the autism community and wanted to start an organization to raise awareness and funds for families. He came to me and wanted me to join the board for this nonprofit organization. And as much as I would love to help and be a part of something like this, I had to assess the risks involved. My worry was that our relationship would change because now I'm not just the behavior analyst that oversees his son's program, but now I would be a board member working with him. These would include late meetings, weekend get-togethers, late calls, possible dinners, and I knew it was going to put me in a situation I didn't want to be in. My learner could be at risk. See, what happens is you have a different kind of relationship. Then the client starts to feel that you would do favors for them or talk about their child during that board meeting. Confidentiality would be broken. So it's not just a boundary violation, but now breach of confidentiality and other code violations that I don't want to get myself into. You want to display professional conduct at all times, and of course, seek advice when you're not sure. Speak to your supervisor. Contact the BACB. John Bailey has an ethics site where they take questions. Don't be afraid to ask. Speaking to another colleague or even other supervisors. Observe change in your relationship with those around you. Be attentive and alert. I had a therapist that came to me and she was a bit bothered. A client came to her and told her how good she looked and placed his hand on her back. She was very uncomfortable and didn't know what to do or how to respond. I advised her to be attentive to how she spoke to the client, how she stood and where she stood. Getting too close in proximity to a client or a supervisor can open that door. We also discovered that she would speak in the client's language to ensure he understood. But I think that was a part of getting too friendly. So we made some changes. I also got the BC ABA, who was the child's direct supervisor, involved in the communication process. So there was no alone time with this one therapist and client. Things got better and we kept those boundaries nice and clear. Remember to self-monitor and reflect. Evaluate what went wrong and how you can avoid it in the future. If you find that you are giving one client more attention, be aware of that. Don't take any gifts. Avoid touching or hugging and keep a good distance from the client to avoid those from happening. What if the client consents to a sexual relationship or consents to giving you money to help you out? Even if they do consent or anyone consents to such boundary violations, it is still a violation. So using consent as an excuse will not be accepted. Here's a diagram. You can be under-involved, which is not a good place to be in. But you can be on the other end of the continuum, which is over-involved. That's where you cross those boundaries and you engage in violations. You want to be in the safe zone. You're doing your job, you're helping, you're supporting the client within this boundary. Be aware when you're falling below or doing beyond that. Okay, let's do a secret word. The word is friendly, F-R-I-E-N-D-L-Y. Being friendly is okay in a professional relationship, but you want to avoid being friends. All right, so let's recap. Set clear boundaries. Be friendly, but not friends. Know your limits as an RBT. Don't be a rescuer. We often fall into that. Because we care so much, we end up going too far, which will often result in burnout. So watch out for that. Stay focused and keep a good physical and emotional safety boundary with your clients, supervisors, and coworkers. Clients can attach to you and then feel betrayed or abandoned if you quit or move on to another job or agency. This happened to a family. The client would make this therapist food and she would join them for dinner, and they had a close relationship. I warned the therapist, told her to be careful. Mind you, this was before this ethical code, but it's a standard practice in other fields. So it felt more like common sense. Well, when this therapist quit and left because funding ran out for this little guy, the client, the mom, was very hurt. She called me crying on the phone, telling me how she treated her like a daughter. And that's where the issue was. I told my client, told her that we can't have these kinds of relationships, and what this therapist did was wrong. So you can see how the client felt, and that's not something you want to do to your client. As I mentioned before, these will lead to dual relationships, conflicts, and so on. It could even impact your team and work ethic. And of course, you can get emotionally involved. So start your relationship off right. Establish the grounds for the relationship, what the client can expect, what is a clear boundary, how does it look. If a violation occurs, address it right away and try to even talk to the clients about it before it happens. Gift giving is a big one we talk to our clients about on the onset and give reminders before major holidays. Work on effective communication and avoid any misunderstandings. Clarify them as quickly as possible. Of course, always speak to your supervisor, or if the concern is with your supervisor, speak to another supervisor or their supervisor and seek advice whenever needed. If the client or anyone is asking you to violate your code of ethics, kindly tell them it's a violation and you're required to adhere to it so that you don't lose your credential or get negatively impacted. That your number one priority is the client and you don't want harm to come to them either. That violation of your code can skew your judgment and may result in poor treatment. Okay, let's jump into the quiz. Good luck. What is professional boundary? A, a dual relationship. B, multiple relationship. C, a clear relationship. Or D, none of these. And the correct response is C, a clear relationship. What is a dual relationship? A, having more than one relationship with someone. B, being friends with a client. C, dating your supervisor. Or D, all of these. And the correct response is D, all of these. How can you avoid violating professional boundaries? A, don't talk to your clients. B, don't give out your personal information. C, give out your personal information. D, let your supervisor deal with it on your behalf. And the correct response is B, don't give out your personal information. How can you avoid violating professional boundaries? A, friend clients and supervisors on social media. B, only share some personal things with your clients. C, don't friend clients on social media. Or D, let your supervisor deal with it on your behalf. And the correct response is C, don't friend clients on social media. Well done. Tommy is Sarah's supervisor. Each day when he walks into the office, she jumps out of her chair and gives him a big hug. What could be the issue here? A, nothing, it's a friendly hug. B, it appears to be violating confidentiality. C, it's okay to hug your supervisor. Or D, it appears to be crossing the professional boundary. And the correct response is D, it appears to be crossing the professional boundary. Tammy is a supervisor. Her and Sam and RBT have become really close. Sam asked her out for dinner. Tammy felt it would be fine. It's just one dinner. Why is this an issue? A, it may impact the quality of supervision. B, it may affect their judgment. C, it could impact the quality of treatment for their clients. Or D, all of the above. And the correct response is D, all of the above. John, a client started texting you. He will text you during office hours. If he texts you outside of those hours, you never answer. This line is strictly your work number. He usually contacts you to cancel sessions or notify you of any changes. Is this violating a professional boundary? A, no, it is not. B, it could because he's texting you. C, yes, it is a violation and should be stopped immediately. Or D, none of these. And the correct response is A, no, it's not. He's not doing anything wrong. You're not doing anything wrong. He's simply canceling a session and he's doing it during office hours, and you're responding only during office hours. So it's as simple as that. John, a client, started texting you. He will text you after hours. He will ask for advice and recently asked you to babysit his son. Is this violating a professional boundary? A, no, it's not. B, it could because he's texting you. C, yes, it is a violation and should be stopped immediately. Or D, none of these. And the correct response is C, yes, it is a violation and it should be stopped immediately. All right, so now you know about boundaries. You're developing the skill to be aware. You understand the violations. How do you know if you've crossed the boundary? Well, 1, the client or supervisor start referring to you as a friend or even a family member, saying you're like a daughter to them or son to them. Gift exchanges. You give gifts, they give you gifts. Social interactions start happening, going out with each other, being asked to hang out, getting together after work. Too much personal information is being shared with the client or supervisor, or vice versa. Loss of sleep over a relationship situation with a client or supervisor. You're overthinking something and worry that it may be a violation. If you're worried about it, chances are it probably is a violation. Offering your client or supervisor additional help outside of work, willing to babysit, give someone a lift, running errands for their personal life, venting to your client or supervisor about others on the team. 1, I don't think your client should hear you vent about anything. Your supervisor should hear you venting, but if you have a complaint about a staff member, tell them your concern. Venting behaviors are things we do with friends and family, so be aware of that. Well, let's wrap up our topic on professional boundaries. My final thoughts. You and your client, supervisor, and coworkers need to establish clear relationships. It's important to be aware of your own behavior. Be aware of how you interact with others, and know when to draw the line. Being friendly and nice is a great thing, but overdoing it and going above and beyond for anyone could negatively impact the relationship, your own health, and most importantly, your client's well-being. If you find yourself in a violation, get some advice. Reach out to your supervisor or a third party to figure out how to resolve this in the most ethical and legal way. If you ever notice your relationships are getting too friendly, notice what you do and work on those things to change your style. Professional is businesslike, but not military. You don't need to be abrupt and rude, but you need to be formal. I remember the client who wanted me to join his nonprofit board once said to me, "You're too formal with me." And I smiled and in my head thought, awesome. Way to go, Shaza. And I hope you'll say the same to yourself. Until the next time, keep clear of inappropriate relationships and build that professional work ethic behavior.